to the Token and Hoff Show on the Roads to Liberty Network.
Hello, Liberty lovers. Welcome to a Monday night special episode of the Roads to Liberty podcast on the Think Liberty Network. I'm so glad that you guys have decided to join me here tonight on a Monday night. It's been a while since we've done one of these Monday night episodes. But I'm glad you guys are here to join me tonight. If you guys have been listening to our podcast for any amount of time, you know our opinions on the insane levels governments across this country have gone to in order to stop the spread of COVID-19. They've destroyed businesses, they've destroyed lives, they've locked people into their homes like animals for an entire year. And on the occasions when people have decided to defy the edicts of this tyrannical government, they have decided to go after people who dare defy their orders. With us tonight is Andrew Cooperrider. He is the owner of a coffee house in Kentucky called Brew, and he joins us here tonight to talk about his struggles with his local government. Welcome, Andrew, to the program.
Well, certainly thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So I first heard about your case when you went on to the Tom Woods show. I listened to his podcast quite regularly, and he had you on there to talk about the struggles you've had over there in Kentucky. Now, one of the strange things is we hear a lot about lockdowns and mandates going on in places like California, Michigan, New York, places like this where we expect that kind of thing. But you don't always hear a lot about Kentucky. Why don't you tell us about some of the struggles you've had as a small business owner in Kentucky and some of the things that you've done in response to them?
Yeah, sure. So, Kentucky has a Democratic governor like most of those other states you just listed off. I think most people kind of don't realize that because they think it's such a heavy red state. They don't realize in the state's history, there's actually only ever been 3 Republican governors. It's been a blue state for a long time. I think they just flipped a legislator like in the last 12 years or so. So, I think that's part of the reason why you don't hear about it as much. And it's not a super big state. I mean, our entire state is 4.4 million. So, our numbers aren't as big no matter which way you look at it because of that. But regardless, here in Kentucky right now, as we sit, we still have capacity restrictions. We have you can't serve a beer or food past midnight. So we still have a curfew here in Kentucky.
Curfew. You're all a bunch of high school kids.
I know, right? We still have a curfew here. We still have capacity restrictions. Of course, 6-foot distancing. Just he announced today that he's going to graciously allow stadiums and venues that have 1,000+ capacity to be allowed to have a 50% capacity. So before they've been at 33%.
How generous of him.
I know, right? I'm very thankful that he's here to keep us safe. And so, and that's been going on for quite a while. We still have a mask mandate in place here in Kentucky. That right now, we ourselves are facing losing our ABC license over the mask mandates because our coffee shop has a liquor license. And so they're taking that away from us or trying to. We have a hearing this month on that. That's been going on for quite some time. And then, but you have, I believe right now it's about 52 other bars that are facing their liquor licenses being taken away for specifically governor mandates issues. So, when people be like, hey, it's not a big deal. Yeah, you can't serve beer past midnight. Well, first off, for a lot of these bars, especially, in Lexington, we're a big college town, University of Kentucky. And not being able to serve beer past midnight's kind of a big deal. I mean, these bars stayed open till 3-4 o'clock. So you're talking they're probably during their peak hours having to stop serving people or face losing their business completely because the state on its own, controls the ABC licenses. And so, there's 52 bars that are in current process to lose their licenses here in Kentucky. Specifically because they've done something to break COVID mandates. And so it is a big deal. Those are people's businesses being just taken away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to liquor licenses, I mean, yeah, you're right about that. These bars, they close at like 4 or 5 a.m. So when you tell bars that make their money at night that they can't serve alcohol past midnight, that's the whole thing,
Well, you
right?
also got
Like,
to
okay,
somehow keep drunk people 6 feet apart too, or you'll get
right.
cited for that. Like that's a problem as well.
Oh, really? Will the health inspector walk into the bar and cite the owner if the patrons aren't being 6 feet
Yeah,
apart?
the state ABC board will come in and do that. Now, and that's what's weird too. Going back to the ABC thing, and I know it's kind of slightly off topic, but the state ABC board is one of the most redundant government agencies because here in Kentucky we have things like dry counties, dry towns, things like that. So a town sets its liquor rules first, and then a county can set its liquor rules, and then the state has its liquor rules, right? So when we went and got our liquor license, we went to our city, did all their steps of approval within our city to get our liquor license, and all the state did was rubber stamp it. It's the local cities that set the rules about when you serve, what the rules are about all those things. The state ABC board is completely useless in this entire process, other than to take away your license when the governor wants to, because they're under direct control of the governor, versus these other local ABC boards are under control of the local town councils that a lot of them are choosing to ignore or just not enforce the governor's mandates. So he's using the state ABC board.
So basically, it's just your governor's way of forcing compliance on people, like going over the head of local governments in order to ensure that people are obeying him specifically.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, take a good look here at back about a year ago. He stopped. You couldn't go to church, right? It was right at Easter. You couldn't go to church. It was no. And he couldn't get the sheriffs to enforce it. So he started rolling out KSP to go to these churches, and they actually put prosecution notices on people's cars that went in. They'd put a sign on their window that said, you need to be under quarantine for the next 2 weeks. And if you step foot out of your house, the health department's going to contact you. If you step foot out of your house, you could face prosecution. And the only reason why that didn't happen is because an attorney, my attorney, actually, Chris Weiss, he stepped up and he said, pro bono, he went to federal court and got an injunction against the governor to say you cannot prosecute these people for going to church. And
right, that's a First Amendment violation.
Quite clearly. And like, I don't think you have to exactly be a constitutional scholar to know you can't arrest people for going to church in America.
Yeah, that's one of the basic rights that you learn as a child that you have. You have the freedom of religion. Right. I mean, prosecuting people for going to church smacks me as a violation of your freedom of religion.
And what's worse is and it goes into the impeachment effort there, which we can talk about here in a bit. But what's worse is upon open records, pulling out open records, the KSP supervisor, and indicating his directions to all the other police officers here in Kentucky. The KSP officer said, when you go out there and you're dealing with this, keep in mind this is clearly a First Amendment rights issue. Like, they were coming out knowing this was against the Constitution, what they were doing. And they just didn't care. They did it anyways.
Right. Well, this is what government likes to do in a lot of these sort of situations. They like to rely. They know that they can't force you to comply with them, right? They know they can't go out and shut down your church because they're going to be hit with the lawsuit. What they're counting on is you not suing. That's what they're counting on. They're counting on you simply complying with their orders so that they don't actually have to try to enforce this empty threat.
Well, and that's quite clear. So right now in Kentucky, you've got this really weird legal situation going on. And so what you have is a legislator that has passed laws that has stated that the governor cannot be doing what he's doing, right? So if a state of emergency wants to last longer than 30 days, he has to call the legislator back into session. The legislator then votes on the emergency and the response and everything else. The governor doesn't have the ability to suspend statutes anymore because under emergency powers authorization, they could suspend statutes, laws. They couldn't suspend the Constitution, but they can suspend laws. And so They took that away. They took away the ability to enforce against businesses. They did all these things. And they passed these bills. He vetoed them. They overcame the veto. And then he went to Franklin County Circuit Courts and he filed an injunction on the legislators and the AG over this law. Now, for those of you who are legally inclined at all, know that's a weird lawsuit because, well, the governor enforces the laws. After a law has been passed, what are you injunctifying the legislator from doing when it comes to a law? They don't do anything. They just sit there and it's been passed. Now you enforce it, right? So if a law is unconstitutional, what would typically happen is the AG, who is the named party in this lawsuit, would come along and name and file a suit against the governor to not enforce that law. That's how it normally works. But instead, the governor's gone and he's injunctified the legislator and the AG. And it's so strange and weird that in Scott County, that a judge here had recently ruled that, well, these restaurants that went to court to get an injunction against the governor from enforcing against them said that, yeah, you're not a listed named party in that suit. Therefore, you cannot be enforced against from the governor's orders. SB1, HB1, and SB2 stand their law. The governor cannot enforce these mandates. So what you have is a situation where one judge has said the governor can be making mandates still. You have another judge, and there's about to be a second judge, saying the governor can't be making mandates because Judge Shepard, who's out of Franklin County Court, has no jurisdiction in theirs. And they're saying, nope, that's not how it's working here. And so you have a situation where the governor hasn't come out and said he's not taking away the mandates, but there's a legal theory that has been proven to be true a few times that if they try to enforce against you, he can't be doing what he's doing. So the question becomes, if a law gets passed and the governor is saying, nope, I don't have to follow that law and here's a good reasoning, and then all the state entities are still enforcing based on what the governor said, has that law even passed?
Right,
because
exactly.
these people are afraid of being prosecuted. So, you know, the state entity still comes in because the governor's given them a reason to do it, even if it's illegal. And they'll still come in and say, I'm going to enforce against you. And you're a business owner. You're like, oh, I don't want to lose my business. I don't want to possibly lose my license. So they're not taking them to court. So that's what they're counting on. They're counting on these people not fighting back at all. And the perfect example of this is since they tried to enforce against us in November and we stayed open and got our food license back, they have not bothered us since. And we have broken a lot of mandates from time to time. And they have not, I don't want to, incriminate anything, but they have not come along and done anything. And I know we have like thousands of complaints into the health department about us and our misbehavior.
Yeah, I mean, probably specifically because you are like the point men in Kentucky for COVID restriction resistance, right? And you're absolutely right in that the government wants to scare people into complying with their mandates, right? Even if they get pushed back, like in your situation, there's always businesses that are too afraid. They don't know, right? They don't think that they can win when they fight back. They don't think they can afford a lawyer or whatever the case may be, and they simply comply.
They look at the culture. Or they look at the culture. I mean, I'm listening to, local lefty pundits out here. And there was a brewery that stood up and just sued the governor. They were still following the mandates, but they sued the governor saying, hey, you can't be enforcing these mandates, right? And they were listed in the Scott County case. That was what I was just talking about. But they have a location here in Lexington. And one of the lefty pundits is like, I'm not going there anymore. Because they dared to sue the governor. They're not even not following the mandates like we did. That's one thing to be like, I'm not going there. You break the law. And it's like, I disagree, but okay. But it's a whole nother thing to be like, there are customers out there who are saying, we're not going to go to a business because we've been so brainwashed by the propaganda of the media. And we've been told that we need to be super afraid of COVID, even though that means you're still going out and about, but you're so afraid of it. You're going out and about because, you're not going to go there anymore. And you were. But the very fact that same business would dare challenge the governor is the reason why they won't go there anymore. And that's the problem.
Right. It's very cult-like behavior. And I mean, for one thing, yeah, it's cult-like. But for another thing, I don't actually believe these people when they say that. Like, I don't believe that any of these people have a Word document on their computer with a list of businesses that they just refuse to go to in the future. Right? They're just saying, "Oh, this business won't enforce the mandates. I'm not going." And then a year later, they'll completely forget about it.
Listen, the left will protest over tons of different things. I would not put it past them. Honestly, I want to put it past them. I want it, and I think that's part of the problem too. Is we the people, the silent majority, the people who don't like the mass and things. We typically fall in and don't like the mandates. We fall into one category: people who want to be left the heck alone. That's all we want to do, is be left alone. So naturally, we're not the kinds of people that when a business is like, put on a mask, we're like, no, I'm never coming back here, and go storming out. We're like, okay, we'll put on the mask because we don't want to cause problems, because we just want to leave people alone.
I just want my coffee and beer. That's all.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the thing too, is that they know that guy may not come back because you're suing the governor, but this guy isn't going to not come back if you don't sue the governor, right? So,
right.
It's a cost benefit analysis that they're making. And I mean, for us, we wouldn't have made the jump. I mean, I was talking to my wife the other day. So long story on how we ended up opening and everything else, but we opened up back in like June. And if you remember, the George Floyd thing was like just happened, right? And when we opened up, we were talking about offering a discount to police for coffee. Okay. And I told my wife, and there's a good business reason why, pretty much because cops are out, we're open till 9. Cops are out all the time, driving around. They might come to a good local coffee shop over McDonald's at like 8:00 at night to get a cup of coffee if we incentivize it, right? It's just knowing that those are people who are out and about and pull long shifts. Anyways. And I said, no, I don't want to get politically involved with the George Floyd thing going on. And, that might, as much as I'd say that should be pretty apolitical to just offer a discount to fire and police and EMS, because they're out and about and they're up late at night.
Yeah, they need coffee. And they're one of the only people that need to drink a coffee late at night.
Right. It makes sense, right? And it's nothing to do with supporting the police or not supporting the police. It's just a business decision. And the very fact that we're like, no, we think that's political right now, we're not going to do it. Those were the kinds of people we were until November, when I was literally faced with losing my business if I closed my indoor dining. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it.
So let's get back to that. What was it that happened that turned you into Mr. I'm not going to listen to these COVID restrictions guy? Because you weren't always that way. You weren't always, I'm just not going to obey this stuff. What was it that happened that convinced you to take this path?
I mean, don't get me wrong. Beforehand, I clearly thought a lot of it was BS. I had issues with it. I'm clearly a liberty-minded individual going into this. I mean, that's part of why we've seen so much success with our movement of standing up. It isn't because we just happened to believe these things out of nowhere. We already did. But to be quite honest, before COVID started, I'm 28 years old. I only have a high school diploma, but I had built a couple successful businesses, and I was doing good. And for those out there, this doesn't mean I had $1 million in the bank, for those people who are financially illiterate, but I did have a net worth of around $3 million in January of 2019. And in a week before he closed indoor dining again, things had gotten so bad. And I had to close one company, and I'm trying to reorganize it and reopen it. But things had gotten so bad that I applied for and got food stamps. And so I went from being worth several $1 million, self-made kind of American dream, to having to rely on the government to provide food for my family. And that was my breaking point, where I said, I can't keep laying down. I've sacrificed for years and years and years. For those who've ever built a business know this. You have sleepless nights. You have nights where you work 48 hours straight because you're trying to build something. There are times where you pay others and you don't pay yourself. There's times I didn't see my son. There's times I didn't see my wife for days. And I can't look at my wife and my son in the eye and say, I sacrificed all that. And now I'm just going to give it up and go suckle on the teat of the government, because that's the position they've put me in.
Yeah, and that's the position they've put millions of people across the country in.
Right. And the calculation for me was I have nothing to lose. And I think a lot of people think they do have something to lose still. And that's why they're not standing up. Because they think they do. And don't get me wrong, it's worked out well for us. I mean, we had a standing up. I mean, we were trying to fly under the radar with staying open, and then the health department just showed up out of nowhere, and then it kind of became big news that they're trying to shut us down. We're staying open. All the news come out. I mean, we're getting on national media. We're getting on Newsmax. We're getting on, Daily Wire's writing articles about us. So we have lines out the door, people. So we end up getting a big influx of cash. And I took it, and I took this other business that we closed. I reorganized it. I got it going. I paid for it to be able to get going again because it was the one that really kind of makes a lot of money long term, right? And it's the kind of it's the bread and butter of the family, always has been. And I got that going, and we were able to get that going again and dig ourselves out of the hole because I was like, I have nothing to lose. Let's go fight this, and we end up getting some victories out of it, right? And we continue to have victories as we stand up and fight for others. Because, when you're a business owner, you're building something because you're saying, I want to pass it on to my family. That is, the American dream isn't just, I started here and I'm going to finish better than I started. It's, I'm going to finish better than I started, but I'm also going to pass that on to my family, to my children. And what I realized is we have an opportunity for me not just to pass on businesses to my son, but to pass on a better world because we have a little bit of a platform. I'm willing to step to it. I got nothing to lose at this point because I was going to lose everything anyways. Like when people message us now and like, I'm never coming to your coffee shop. I'm like, well, it wasn't going to be open. So I don't really care if you weren't going to come. You didn't have business not to come to. So, and we just didn't. We just don't have anything to lose. And so we went all in. We betted on black, and we keep betting it on black, and we kept escalating up our actions. And because when you push back against the government, you realize they're kind of like schoolyard bullies that when you push back, they're not going to bother you anymore, but they'll go bother the guy next to you. And most businesses are stopping after they stop bothering you. We, on the other hand, are like, no more. I'm not going to watch you go pick on this guy too now. After I just fought and I had all these people. And that's the other thing too, is I had thousands of people come out to support us. And there's an added pressure of, I don't want to let them down. They're standing up and they're supporting us because they're seeing hope in what we're doing. Hope that there's going to be an end to this government tyranny, this dictatorship we're seeing here in Kentucky, where you got one or two men who are making all the decisions for everyone. They saw that hope, and it's wrong of me to take everything they've invested into us and that hope from them and not live it out as best I can.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that we've made a point in saying on this show is that the lockdowns don't end when government says they end. They end when you say they end. They end when you say we're not going to listen to them anymore. Right? Government is a trailing indicator of how society feels anyway. Right? If people decide the lockdowns are over, lockdowns are over. There's nothing government can do about that. They can't fight us all.
No,
right?
No, they can't at all.
Hundreds of millions of us and a few thousand of them. But right. I want to get back to your case, because when you started going after your governor and fighting back against them, Governor Bashears had this to say about you guys. He said this action, and he's talking about was your petition to not recall him, but to impeach him.
Yeah.
Right. So he said
so for people to understand, that is in Kentucky, we have something called a citizen's impeachment. It's legal filings with the state legislator where you're asking to form an impeachment committee to investigate set charges. This isn't just like go out and get 100 people to sign a petition. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
So he said about this, he said, this action is silly and completely unjustified. The Kentucky Supreme Court ruled every step the governor has taken is legal. But more concerning, this is the type of dangerous, angry rhetoric and disinformation that led to Wednesday's attack on the U.S. Capitol and our democracy. People are watching and listening. Everyone has a duty to be responsible. So he is flat out calling your resistance an act of violence, an attack on democracy. He's feels about the DC riots. The way he's using it is to say these are bad, violent people who are trying to obstruct the legal process of our democracy, all because you wanted to keep your coffee house open.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what's funny too. So let's break that down. First, he says, "Well, in Bashir v. Akery, they agree with me every step of the way. I've been okay and legal." You know, he leaves out the fact that he's been taken to federal court now like 6 times and has lost every single time on constitutional grounds. He lost on the church ban. He lost on the travel ban. He lost on the mass gathering, no protest ban. He's now lost, in a way, he lost when we went to court because we got our food license back. We're operating, we're open, we're good to go. You know, so he's sitting there saying, oh, no. I mean, you know, he's also lost, I'm sorry, on closing parochial schools. As well, you know, closing church schools. And so, you know, he's sitting there saying, well, the state legislator said it was okay. Yeah, look, you're leaving out the fact that, one, you've been sued and found guilty of breaking the Constitution 5 times. And what I just listed off by the federal government. As well, you have been additionally, not just in quote unquote good faith, right? But you knowingly were breaking the First Amendment when you're doing church bans based upon the conversations you were having. So you have that. And then also you have him saying, oh, they're just terrorists with this rhetoric that's driving us apart. And it goes, first off, I'm following a legal process. It is a legal process for me to file for your impeachment here in Kentucky. That is a legal process. I am following. You know what's real domestic terrorism? Not allowing us to do that and saying we can't do that, because that's what leads to people with rifles showing up at your houses and trying to start off a armed revolution. See, we were left these processes like the citizens impeachment, like our ability to First Amendment right to petition our government for redresses, specifically so we don't have to resort to violence. And I think that is right there the most dangerous thing he could say, is to say you expressing your grievances through the legal and nonviolent means that have been provided to you by your government is somehow domestic terrorism. When I say that's quite the opposite, because the fact that I'm doing this is what's preventing domestic terrorism from happening. These types of procedures is why we don't need to go grab a rifle in order to make a revolution happen, but we can do it through legal and nonviolent means.
Exactly. You're trying to do things the right way, the legal way, and he's responding with comparing you to by essentially calling you a domestic terrorist.
Right.
Which I was shocked when I saw that quote. When I saw that your governor was comparing you, what was essentially calling you a domestic terrorist for wanting to keep your coffee house open and using legal loopholes to keep them off your back. They're like, oh, well, these guys are using rhetoric of domestic terrorists. It's like, my God, man, what are you even thinking? And then I remember this is the same guy that wanted to shut you down in the first place. I'm like, oh, of course. It's a power grab. You can't. Powerful people cannot allow the little guy to defy them and get away with it.
Well, and you know, we've had 2 protests over the last week outside what's called the governor's mansion. It's also called the People's House. And here in Kentucky, and it's funny because, you know, they'll be like, oh, you're going to go bother him at the governor's mansion. That's where he lives. You're bothering his kids. It's one thing to go protest with Capitol. It's another thing to go bother the governor. The governor's mansion is literally across the street from the Capitol House here in Frankfort. Like, not like it's a major street either. It's a 1-lane, one-way circle around the State House. And on one side of that circle is the governor's mansion. Like, literally, you can stand at the Capitol building and see the governor's front door. Like, that is the same place. And not only that, but at the end of the day, it's not his personal residence. It's called the People's House. Yes, he lives there, but it's owned by the taxpayers. And so the reason why I bring that up is there was a situation that occurred early last year. They called us a domestic terrorist for having the protest there at his house, even though it's literally 100 feet from somewhere that if we'd had the protest there, you wouldn't call us a domestic. It doesn't make any sense. But the reason why I say that is the governor has constructed here in Kentucky a fence around the governor's mansion that never was there for like hundreds of years. We've never had a fence there.
He built a wall
He built a wall around his
What
house.
a racist.
Yeah. Around the people's house. Sorry, the taxpayer-funded governor's mansion. He built a wall around it because last year there was a protest where one person hung a doll with his face on it from a tree. And, that person shouldn't do that. That obviously throws off a message. But because of that, he spent $400,000 of taxpayer money building a fence around the mansion and then came out and said, these people are trying to terrorize me. On the other side of that door where they were is where my children play, forgetting the fact. And I love this. This just went over the head of all the media. I believe at the time he was breaking his own travel ban, being in Florida with his kids and his wife. They weren't actually there at the time of it occurring. Yeah, all I'm saying is he was awfully tan. He was awfully tan.
I mean, it's pretty amazing how all these lockdown politicians will do this. They'll rant and rave about other places, aka Florida, not being as strict as they are, but then they'll go on vacation there.
Well, or they'll
you shouldn't go there, but I will.
Well, keep in mind at the same time you don't know this. Why am I saying keep in mind? At the same time, our governor here had a guidance in place saying no youth sports. His sons were on a traveling baseball league in Tennessee and Indiana and Ohio playing baseball while Kentucky youth sports weren't going on. And then when he was pointed that out to him, he said, "Oh, you got to keep my kids out of this, guys. Come on now."
Wow, what a smuck.
I know. It's like, first, you're bringing my kids into it by saying my son can't play baseball. I have a 9-year-old son. You're like saying he can't play baseball this year, but your sons get to go on a traveling. Oh, by the way, you have a travel. Now, the ban wasn't in place because it got pulled down in court, remember, but he had a travel advisor saying you shouldn't be traveling. Meanwhile, and you couldn't play youth sports in Kentucky. Meanwhile, you have his kids on a traveling baseball team in other states playing ball.
And I love stories like this. It's like when the mayor of Austin, Texas, he zoomed in to give a statement to his city telling everyone to stay in place from his vacation home in Mexico. So it's like this guy's literally on vacation, zooming in, telling everyone to stay in place. He's in Mexico.
Well, we see. I mean, here we had. This is what's funny. So here we had a point where you couldn't go get your hair cut, right? And so they banned haircut.
We call that Nancy Pelosi's law.
Okay, Nancy Pelosi's law. Well, we had one here, and then our Lieutenant Governor Coleman. And for the purpose of this story, you need to know she's a woman. But anyways, Lieutenant Governor Coleman recently found herself in a scandal when it was discovered that there were friends. So we're like the worst state in the country for unemployment. We have a giant unemployment getting out payments debacle. There are people who haven't gotten their unemployment and have been on the waiting list to be serviced now for a year in Kentucky. Okay. Like, this is really, really bad. And so it was discovered that at the time, if you knew the lieutenant governor, or you knew the governor, or you knew the head of unemployment, you could text them and be like, "Hey, can I get some help with my claim?" And then they would help you with the claim. And so there's a text message where she sends a person's name to the head of unemployment, goes, "Can you deal with this lady? It is my hairdresser, so let's make sure we take care of her." And so not only is her hairdresser getting special treatment, but at the time nobody's supposed to be seeing their hairdresser, she's indicating she is seeing her hairdresser, and her hairdresser needs special appointment help with their unemployment, which I wonder if she was claiming that she was making the money that clearly Lieutenant Governor Coleman was paying her on her unemployment when she's filling out the documents. I'm sure she didn't. And so, you have potentially unemployment fraud going on there if her hairdresser is making money and Lieutenant Governor Coleman's helping her. You have her disobeying the own lockdowns, getting her hair done. And then you also have special favors going out for people who know them, all in one little gist of text messages there. And then to throw salt in the wound, just the other day, it came out that there was 39 state workers who gamed the unemployment system and got unemployment when they weren't supposed to. Or I'm sorry, there's 19, not 39. There's 19 who gamed the unemployment system and got unemployment they weren't supposed to, while hundreds of thousands claims weren't being filed, and 17 of the 19 are being reported as workers in the unemployment office.
Man, you gotta love stuff like this.
I mean,
Stuff like this is why I'm a libertarian. Is just you see the corruption, you see the hypocrisy, and you think, my God, these people cannot be allowed to run my life. What a mess these people have run. But my man, we are up against the clock. We have been talking for over a half hour now. I would love to go for another half hour, but that's the time frame we set for tonight. So where can people follow you? Where can people find more information about you? And where can people support your anti-government cause?
So you can follow us on Facebook, just Brood. We're in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can follow us on Facebook on Brood. You can also go to Twitter at BroodLex, Lex, is our Twitter handle there. You can follow us there. We also have a YouTube channel, Andrew Cooperrider /Brood. We do a podcast called Fresh Brewed Kentucky Politics. And then also, if you just want to buy our coffee, you can go to brewedco.com, BREWEDCO.com, and visit us there. If you just want to give me money, you can go to donate.brewedco.com, if you're up for that.
All right, and thank you so much for coming on the program. We need more business owners like you guys who defy government and decide that the lockdowns are already over. You guys just have not realized it yet. Thank you, Andrew, for coming on the program.
Thank you, sir.
All right, remember, everybody, the website to buy our magnificent merchandise is roads2liberty.com. That's roads2liberty.com. You can also go to think-liberty.com for all our awesome podcast episodes. Also, if you like listening to this and want to watch our episodes, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/roads2liberty. All right, everybody, that is it from me. Tune in tomorrow to Token and Hobbs. Until then, y'all have a good night.